we have a couple different items that we're going to be polishing. These are two little baby nitrous bottles that Jamie from PFI dropped off. These have to be polished, as well as this turbo housing. This shape is going to be super easy to get sandpaper all over the place and polish it. It's going to be easy to put through the wheels. What I've noticed so far with this, getting it to this stage, which is just 220 grit, is you notice all those little scratch marks going this way around the bottle. You have to get all of those out in order to get the mirror finish. Otherwise, you will see all of those. Right off the bat, what I've noticed between this aluminum and this aluminum, for whatever reason, I'm not a doctor, so I don't understand science.
You do not know what you are talking about.
This aluminum is harder, and it has been much harder to get out the scratch marks than it has been to knock down this rough casting. So on this, we're trying to get all those lateral scratch marks out. And on here, we're worried about all these little pits that are going to be kind of the leftover from the casting. Step number one for all of these is knock it down with 220. Overall, the polishing process is pretty boring to watch. That's why most of this is going to be time lapses, except when I pause to explain something to you. So here you can see all those little scratches a lot more defined. So these are actually pretty deep, and I spent probably a solid hour per nitrous bottle just trying to sand out those lines. But this is a very crucial part. If you don't get all those little imperfections and little pits out in the beginning, it's going to look terrible in the end when you polish it, and you're going to have to go back and redo it all again. So it's best to just do it right the first time. And once you're through this part, it gets a lot easier, and you start to get satisfaction once you start wet sanding. This is 80 grit, which is pretty heavy. I normally don't use this, but I'm using this and wedging it in here and just going to town. I had to tape this finger because it started bleeding. So you could see, like, right in there, it's starting to kind of, I'm not trying to get it perfect, but I'm trying to get all that rough crud out of there. You can see it's starting to work in a couple spots there. Right back here is kind of impossible for me to get to. I keep going back to it with this, but my fingers are cramping up. So I'm doing what I can, but just kind of fill you guys in on what I'm trying to accomplish now. So once this is all smoothed out, these are all done in 220, so then I got 320 wet sandpaper. So you can see how it kind of, I mean, it kind of livens it up just with that. And you could see some of the deeper scratches a lot easier. And then if there are any little pits that I missed, it's hard to tell too because everything's black. But right there, you could see that little tiny black pit. Focus. That little tiny thing. That's not dirt. That's just a little pit that I didn't sand out all the way. So this is ridiculously time consuming, but that's where I'm at right now. So we're going to go back to a time lapse, and I'm speeding the time lapse up even faster than what it's filming. So I'm going to get to the next step, keep going. I'll fill you in when something exciting changes or when all my fingers are bleeding. So similar to what I just explained about getting all the little imperfections out, you'll notice that as I'm wet sanding here, I keep getting the air sander and going back over, because as you make the scratch marks finer and finer, you're going to notice more imperfections as you get the surface smoother and smoother. Again, this is not a very exciting process, but the end result is very worthwhile. But this part, I got to talk over it and explain to you a little bit, because watching me sand for what was hours at a time is super boring. So now what I'm doing is I'm just hitting it real quick with the buffer to kind of speed up what I just talked about. This is going to show all of the imperfections that are left. My poor little Harbor Freight grinder is freaking hot, and if I put any amount of weight into it, it would just die. So luckily, Manny, my neighbor who did the carpet and the bugs, he's got a shop across the way, he had this big bad boy, and it is not a weak little like the Harbor Freight one. Did a little test hit on that there. Did a little test hit on that. My hands are shot, but we have quite a bit more sanding left to do. So same thing, I'm going over the second nitrous bottle just to show all the imperfections. As you can see, I found a lot of imperfections left on the turbo after running over it with the buffer. Once you get all those pits out, the wet sanding recipe, I guess, that I use. So I do 220 to start, like we said, and then 320, 500, 800, 1,000, 15, and then 2,000 is what I finished with. You'll see here in a minute, I had a little too much confidence in the buffer, and on this first pass on the turbo, I did not go all the way to 2,000 grit, which left some imperfections that you will see here in a moment. As you just saw, I finished polishing it, and then I put the turbo in that beam of sunlight there and saw a lot of little scratches that you really can't see otherwise. There you can kind of see like a fog. You can kind of see some scratches in there. I'm not happy with that. And then also these little deep pits in there that I can't really get to. They look a lot worse than I want. In here, I don't really have a way to get in there, and I told the guy that. It's hard, like I can't even fit like a pinky in here with enough force to like grind any of that down. And these Dremel bits, I mean, I could probably get in there like that, but I can't like smooth it anymore, if that makes sense. Like I could knock that down, which I'm gonna try and do, but I don't have a way to sand it. These things are way too fat. And then all these other little bits are too coarse. So the only way to do it is just like meticulously, slowly sanding it without getting other bits. All polishing is you're making the scratches smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you can't see the actual scratch marks because they're so fine. So then that way the light reflects off of everything instead of grabbing hard edges. There's your scientific lesson of the day. So I'm not gonna time lapse any of this. Just now you know what I'm doing, and then I'll show you the end product. What we're trying to avoid there is that haze and those micro scratches, which is kind of what all of this has. From about here, it looks killer. I don't think anyone's going to get close enough to really get up and see that, but regardless, this is my name, and I don't want to send it out like that. So, not making a penny on this. If you break it down by the hour, I'm probably close to 10 hours into just this thing, and I think I'm charging them $200. So there's 20 bucks an hour if you don't include any of the material I used. I know I told you I was going to show you the finished result, but I thought I'd show you the tool I made. I've wrapped sandpaper around a paintbrush. It is allowing me to get in here and just pound it. And as you can see, all of this is done. And then I'm gonna get rid of this water. Still have to get all in there, but that from the Dremel is what all of this looked like. It is now 9:30 at night. I have not eaten yet today, and I've been sitting right there. 8 hours minus getting up to drink coffee and water. It is much, much, much better. I mean, overall, it is tremendously better, and then just getting all of that crap out of there. I missed some spots right in here. I dug at that for, I kid you not, probably 30 minutes on just that spot. And I couldn't get the paper to go in the right angle, so it is what it is. And we got that down there, but that cleaned up a lot better than it was. That looks killer. Two things I forgot to explain entirely were the actual buffing pads and some of the compounds that I use. So that yellow wheel is very coarse as far as the buffing pad goes, and then there are two different stages of compound that I use on that. The compounds are kind of like really fine, like powdered sandpaper almost, that you put on the wheel, and then that's what actually cuts and gets that really fine polished look, I guess. So you notice the other wheel on there is white, so that's a lot softer of a wheel, and I use softer compounds on that. You want to clean the wheel off. I usually take like a wrench or something and I just kind of jab it in there, and that forces a lot of that compound off when you're switching. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. You just move it back and forth and you continue to do so until you get the desired look. All the products that I'm using are Zephyr. I think Zephyr made that yellow wheel. They make the compounds, and then they also make that green solution that I was using to wipe off the parts when I was done buffing them. So if you have any interest, those are the best products I've found. You just saw how well they work. Here's some finished shots of the parts. So I texted the guy, the customer, it's P-Spec, I think is the name of his business. And I sent him pictures of it before when I thought I was done. And then come to find out I wasn't happy with it. And he texted me when I was probably like, I kid you not, guys, after I finished it the first time, I probably sanded it and redid it for another 4 hours. I'm not kidding. It was a pain in the butt. So anyways, probably about 3 hours in to doing it again, he texted me and goes, oh, that looks great. And I was like, okay, that's all I got. I gotta go. Bye now.